the 99th episode of the New Ventures podcast. I am your host, Sanjoy Sanyal, the founder of Regain Paradise, a boutique climate finance firm and a visiting fellow at the Cambridge Judge Business School. Our guest for today is Apurva Manek, a veteran coffee trader in Southeast Asia, joining us from Vietnam. Welcome, Apurva.
Hey, Sanjay. Wish you a good day and thank you for having me on your show.
Apurva, from Mumbai to Ho Chi Minh City, that's a movie show, really speaking. Tell us what took you here.
It's a journey that has spanned about 25 years so far. In the year 1998, I qualified as a chartered accountant from Mumbai. And I landed my very first job in Bangkok with a company called GPREMG. Now, GPREMG was a company as what you would call a typical Indian conglomerate dealing in multiple commodities at that time. They would take in new batches of freshers every year. And when I reached, I was immediately assigned to the coffee desk. I worked with them until the year 2000, in which time I visited Indonesia. And then towards the mid of 2000, they moved me to Singapore. After that, GPREMG faced some troubles where they closed down their Singapore operations. However, my job at that time was all about accounting and finance because I was a chartered accountant. And my boss then, a Danish guy who took liking to me and my work, he joined a company in Vietnam in the year 2003. That's when he thought of me, that he probably wanted somebody like me to join his team, bring on board my experience. And he called me up one day and he says, do you want to come over to Vietnam? However, not as a coffee accountant, but we use your experience and we make you a coffee trader. So in the year 2003, I came to Vietnam. I joined this company called Noble Resources. Noble was a company listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So I worked with them until 2010. And then in 11, I joined my ex-boss again, the Danish guy, who had set up his own company. So I worked with him again for 1 year until the company, along with its team and the book, was sold off to a Singaporean company. That Singaporean company was called RCMA. My journey with them spanned 2011 until 19. And after that, I worked for another small outfit called Artist Trading. After which I have now been with this company called LFTC since the last 3 years. So I'm the chief representative and senior trader in Vietnam, taking care of the green coffee trading operations out of Southeast Asia. That kind of sums up 25 years of experience in the green coffee business and focused mostly in Southeast Asia.
How occasionally misfortune, if I can call it, can turn to good fortune, and how relationships have developed across borders. I mean, in the sense this Danish gentleman obviously had an influence in your life. Those are things that I think make people's lives so interesting. Since you switched from accounting to came to Vietnam as a coffee trader, it's been all coffee trading, is it?
It's always been coffee trading, but my interest in numbers has made me a good trader. And I also trained a lot of accountants and finance guys because of my experience that I brought in. Basically, I think every trader is just not a trader. They perform a lot of different roles. Having a good, sound accounting and finance background and understanding makes one a very good trader.
What's a day in the life of it? I mean, the only trading I know about is liar's poker. That type of thing. That's a long time back.
Okay, let's say in my case, what is my daily routine like? What is a normal day like? The very first thing in the morning that I do, Sanjay, is take a look at the market screen. Coffee is a tradable, hedgeable commodity. We have markets for coffee. Robusta coffee is traded in London and Arabica coffee is traded in New York. So every day we have a live market Monday to Friday, which goes on till I think about past my bedtime. So when I'm off to bed, I really don't know how the market's closed. So the first thing that I do the next morning, before I even pick up my brush, is to see how the markets closed the previous day. And from then on, it's all about catching up on your emails, replying to your emails, reading your market reports, reaching out to your buyers to figure out what are they in the market for today, or if at all not. And then also figuring out what is happening in the local market. You see, it's not only about selling, but it's also about buying. It's also about looking at various internal things that go on in that organization. Like, let's say you want to probably check the exposures with the individual customers and all. So the day can be very long because, as I said, the markets for us close past midnight. And some of our buyers are in Europe and some of them are in America. So we are constantly busy talking to different customers or emailing them or chatting with them way past our dinner time and into the bedtime as well. So that's a long, busy day that we have.
It's kind of what I imagined it to be. Just a quick thing, because a lot of our audience may not get this so easily. Who are your buyers? Are they the agents for the large coffee companies, or are there some other type of organization? Who are the people you buy coffee from?
All right. Let me explain to you how the whole coffee supply chain works. In Vietnam, we have small farmers, we have big farmers who produce coffee and who deliver it to collectors. Collectors are the people who will, as I said, they collect coffee from various different farmers and then they go and sell the coffee to a Vietnamese export company who has buying stations in Vietnamese countryside. Then we come into the picture as traders who deal or buy from the Vietnamese exporters. And then we sell to some trade houses, we sell to some roasters, or we sometimes sell to very small wholesalers as well. So our buyers could be sometimes as big as companies that like Nestle, sometimes JDE, which is Jacobs Douwe Egberts, which is the world's biggest coffee buyer. And you also have like Kraft Foods, Folgers, Lavazza. There are many different coffee buyers in the world, and what we would call them typically the industry.
I think that gives a very good flavor. Now, getting back to what we really want to discuss, which is the impact of climate change, if any, on the coffee industry in Southeast Asia, particularly Vietnam. I think it'll be just good for us to start by saying, you've been looking at the industry actually since the beginning of your career, because that's when you worked in Bombay. But how has the industry changed in Southeast Asia? Obviously, Vietnam is now a large producer of coffee, Robusta coffee. But how has the industry changed? Just give us a little bit of a perspective.
When I came into the coffee world in 1998, Vietnam and Indonesia were the two upcoming Asian countries with coffee production. And climatically, they are more suited for Robusta production. Arabica needs high altitudes, and they are, of course, there in Vietnam and all, but somehow the plantations in Robusta from the lowland to the central parts of the country were all Robusta trees because Arabica could not survive there. So when I came in, Vietnam was producing barely about 200,000 tons of coffee. Now, 200,000 tons of coffee as compared to today in 2025, which is 1,800,000 tons of coffee. You can imagine the perspective, how many times the production has grown. So the very first change is the sheer size, the crop size that has increased. Now that is also because Robusta coffee is something that goes into all of our instant coffees and espressos. And they also go into certain blends with Arabica coffee. So the world needed this coffee. And in terms of quality, initially Vietnam did not really have that much knowledge or that much expertise to produce many different varieties or qualities of coffee. So they would have standard 2 or 3 grades, which were not even so clean or which were not even segregated as per the screen sizes. It is over a period of time and with support and education from the buyers that the Vietnamese embarked on a journey of evolving, changing the way they thought, grading their coffees, cleaning their coffees, and serving to the buyers overseas different varieties and different grades. The second change, I would say, was in the presentation of the coffee. That was in 1998 till the mid 2000s. The change was subtle, and yet you could feel it every day because the Vietnamese people are industrious. They're very easy to learn things. They're very hungry. And of course, they wanted to catch up with Brazil, which they had heard about, who was then already the number one producer of coffee in the world. Also, when I came into Bangkok and when I came to Vietnam, that is 1998 and 2003 respectively, found that a lot of employees or a lot of people were not so fluent with English, spoken English. Therefore, a need for an expatriate such as myself to come in and to be like a link between the Vietnamese side and the buyers. Now, not that I came in with a knowledge of Vietnamese language, but I absolutely was on board to helping my Vietnamese colleagues learn English. So I was also helping them to learn English and to speak English and to write emails in English. And now I would say that in 25 years, I think two generations have passed since then. And the third big change that we see today is that the Vietnamese exporters have so many employees who have probably received education abroad. They speak very good English. They are so presentable that today the Vietnamese people have been participating in expos and conferences all over the world, branding the companies and propagating about what they are doing and all that. So that are three very big changes that I've seen from the time I came into this industry till now. The fourth one I would say is the increase or the interest of the Vietnamese companies to learn more about how they can hedge themselves to reduce the losses, how they can improve the production to have a larger production into their farms, and how they can undertake good farming practices for a sustainable coffee production for years to come. So these are the major changes.
Yeah, amazing. I just hold on to the last point because I think we will delve into that shortly in our podcast. But remember something that telling me I'm reminded of a project I did a year and a half back, which is around recycling of waste in apparel waste in Vietnam. And I just realized, how large these industrial bases are in Vietnam. And given the fact that the country really came into being in the 1970s, how quickly the country has built itself. And I think that to me just speaks to the industriousness, the hunger for knowledge, the hunger for doing things that are there in Vietnam. I also read at that time that the Vietnamese school system is one of the best in the world, actually. And that perhaps explains a little bit of how quickly they've been able to learn English.
Yeah. I think the drive was seen, if I may say so, and with no offense to anyone. When I came into Vietnam in 2003, I had a colleague and she was over 50 years old at that time. And she yet visited every evening an English language center after work before going home. Now, at that age, she had the drive for improvement. She had a drive for inclusion because she wanted not to be left out. She wanted that she should be a part and she should be able to share her knowledge because she had immense knowledge about the local coffee industry. She had worked with some local Vietnamese companies before she joined this multinational company we were working with. But the whole thing that I noticed about these guys is that they are not shy. They really want to make a difference and they want a better life. And I see nothing wrong in that because I, at my age also, though I'm not, I'm just 52, but I feel that the day learning stops, you start aging faster. You need to keep doing something newer, to keep learning something, even if it's a very small thing during a day, to keep that interest alive, to keep you going. And here are these people who are so hardworking. They're going to school, they're going to multiple tuitions after that. The parents are supporting them. They are being driven on motorbikes from one place to the other. And it's amazing. I say hats off. And they understand the competition and they are ready to set it or meet it bang on like that.
One of the things that you said is about qualities. I mean, the only thing I know about coffee is drink it. I know about Robusta and instant coffee and Arabica, of course. Will it be correct to make two statements that as Vietnam expanded its coffee industry, a lot of it went from green coffee to roasted coffee, and therefore also increase an average price realization? Would that be correct?
I would not say that it's entirely correct, because Vietnam still is exporting a major quantity of the world's green coffee beans for Robusta. What I can say from my experience is that in the past, we have seen that the big roasters or the industry players would buy Vietnamese coffee and then they would freight it to whichever place they have their factories for production. That not only meant a transit time, which was a loss in time, it also meant higher expenses, and it also meant a lot of logistical challenges. A lot of these players now have realized that it makes more sense to set up a roasting plant or an instant coffee processing plant at the origin itself. Why not go to the source directly, cutting out a lot of time spent, money spent, and to get a feel directly of what is happening locally. So the reliance upon the international traders is less. So Sanjay, in a matter of speaking, in 2003, I think we're going to work with 2003 and 2025 in my discussions, okay? In 2003, there were probably
That's
just
perfect. A before-after picture.
Yeah, there were hardly one or two roasting companies in Vietnam. Today, you're talking of no less than 12. So you can imagine everybody saw the value in coming to Vietnam. And since instant coffee is demanded globally more than roasted, we have a lot of instant coffee processing facilities here. And just as a reference point, I think Nestle last year has made a big announcement that they are going to double their instant coffee processing capacity. And so has an Indian company, which is called Non Cafe in Vietnam. So there is a lot of demand. There is a lot of work that these instant coffees companies are doing. While roasted beans is something which is like a secretly guarded formula. Okay. I may ship out green beans to you, but when the beans enter your factory or your roasting plant, how are you roasting it? What are you blending it with? Are you mixing some other material with it? That is a recipe that only you would be aware of. You are not ready to. It's like a Coke thing or a Pepsi thing where everybody guards their own secret formula. So while the Vietnamese roasted beans are getting popular locally, I don't see much of an export expansion or explosion for that. Yes, the value addition is happening, but it's happening within Vietnam. And I also know that because of a lot of instant coffee plants having moved to Vietnam, plants in Europe have either gone into a slowdown or some have even closed down or have reported less business coming their way.
Right. You started by saying that coffee in Vietnam is grown by both large estates as well as small farmers. Create a supply side picture, if you don't mind.
Okay. So in Vietnam, the Robusta coffee production is mostly from the south of Vietnam till the central parts of Vietnam. There are multiple stakeholders in the supply chain, and it starts at a very small level where you have the smallest of the farm holders, right? I mean, a small farm holder, I would say, is somebody who has less than 1 hectare of land, which is probably like a backyard or a front yard or somewhere by the roadside, that he's planting some coffee trees and he's just plucking the cherries when they are available. Then there are bigger farmers who have, let's say, between 1 hectare and 10 hectare of land. These are farmers who are sometimes supported by export company. They are pre-financed by some export companies. And then there are some, I wouldn't say that there are family-owned farms here like we see mostly in India or Brazil. In Vietnam, there are not too many individual farmers owning very big pieces of farm, but they are all doing like a tolling service for these big exporters. Now, these farmers, they harvest their coffees typically from October every year. And October and November is more like the harvesting season when the beans have set in and they have ripened, and they would go and pluck the cherries off the trees. Depending upon the financial capacity of the farmers to hold, some would even go and sell it immediately after drying the cherries. They would go and sell it to the collector, or some may even choose to keep it as it is, depending upon their need for money. We have seen that typically the farmers would come out and sell coffee a little bit before the Vietnamese New Year or the Tet Festival, because they need money to pay off the money lenders if they borrowed money from, or they need to spend money for the festivities. And they ideally like to set off all the loans, pay off everything before the new year, because I think as a superstition, they want to begin the new year at zero. They don't want to have loans to start with. And the second time, traditionally, we always saw pressure coming on the farmers to sell whatever they were holding back a little bit when the school fees were to be paid within June, July for the next year. But again, this has changed over a period of time, Sanjay. What I'm talking about is a very typical scenario. Now, you have farmers selling it all year round, and sometimes a farmer may choose not to sell it at all, because in the last 3-4 years, we have seen that the farmers, as we call it, are the kings. They decide when to sell and what price to sell at, because the market situations have been such where they realize a lot of value for the produce. They were not forced to sell the coffee. And sometimes they also had multiple cropping. They were not only producing coffee, but they were also producing maybe macadamia nuts, or they were producing dragon fruits, or they were producing, pineapple or black pepper or maize. So depending upon how the situation got, the farmers would go out and sell. Now, these collectors obviously are bigger fishes in the supply chain because they have more financial capacity, A, to buy, and B, to hold. And they would have a good warehouse or a big storage house, a big room in their house in the countryside. So these collectors would have a good tie-up with the export companies again, and they would also be like the managers for all these small and big farmers. The collectors are very popular in these smaller towns, and they hold quite a clout. If you need to send a message, if you want to train the farmers, you go approach a collector and say, hey, I need about a meeting with 10 farmers, and if you can collect them, we can teach them something new, what's happening and all. So collectors are very important. And again, the big collectors, small collectors is just a matter of perspective. Then comes in the Vietnamese exporters, who are these companies who are buying raw material, or the FAQ. FAQ is like the fair average quality. And they are processing it into finished coffee, which is an exportable grade. So there ends the supply side or the supply chain until the coffees are containerized and shipped out of Vietnam. And the same is the supply chain in Indonesia.
Wonderful. Apurva, this is very interesting. So, what I'm hearing you say is that you collect a lot of coffee from the large estates, which are run by groups of farmers, possibly. They control when they want to sell.
Every day, the government is sending out messages like via SMSs to the farmers. The support from the government, the Vietnamese government, to the farmers is immense. The farmers here are surprisingly very well aware of what is happening in the international coffee markets, and they get news kind of every day, so they are aware. The government is also running TV programs, on agriculture, where the farmers are aware of what time the programs are telecast. They know what is happening. So the farmers take decision about the selling prices based upon the information they get from the government on a regular basis, I would say on a daily basis. So let's say it's not possible that you would sweet talk a farmer into selling you coffees which are way below the market price. Because today the farmer is quite aware. He knows what is the price which is being sold at in the international market. And he also knows from different collectors what they are paying for buying the raw material. Today, every buying station up country displays a board saying today's price is so much, so much. So in my case, if I am a collector, I may decide to sell to one guy and not to the guy next door to him, because the guy next door is offering a lower rate than the market rate. So the decision to sell or not to sell is completely on the collectors and also on the farmers. If the farmers have collected enough money, they do not have any urgent needs like school fees or loans to settle, they may choose to hold on to the produce that they have.
And the other thing which I found interesting, Apurva, was the point that you made about buyers helping the producers up their
Yeah.
game.
As I said a few minutes ago, that Vietnamese exporters, they up their game in the international business by creating different qualities, by finding out what qualities the buyers were getting from different origins. So today, what is happening is the world has become very competitive. Vietnam has become very competitive. Now, every exporter, in order to secure the supply for himself, he is providing support to the farmers. He's pre-financing the farmers, right? So even before the crop year is starting, they are giving out loans to the farmers, or they're providing various different kind of non-financial help, like if they need some foodstuffs, or if they need some material for the farms, like let's say a tarpaulin, or if they need, should I say, some help with fertilizers and all that, they get help from the big exporters. Today, every exporter is trying to secure that pipeline. They want the farmers to produce the coffee in the farms, come and sell the produce only to them through the collectors, of course. So this is one help that they are giving. But not only are the Vietnamese exporters doing this, but bigger buyers like Nestle and JDE, they also stepped into this world, to the world of the farmers years ago. And they brought in the culture of sustainability and good farming practices. So years ago, when the names like 4C organization, Utskape organization were new, Nestle and the big buyers, some of them, they would go into the farmlands, into the upcountry region. They would meet with collectors, and then they would educate the farmers that what was expected out of them and why they should do that. What would be the objective? Why should they be following good farming practices? What would they achieve out of it? What would they get if they followed that good farming practices? And they set up typically what were called as, a Nestle model farm. Let's say in a small district where there are 100 farmers, they set up one farm where all the farmers could come into that farm. It was earmarked, and the farmers could learn, they could ask their questions, they could get any sort of training that they wanted, so that they could also apply those good farming practices. So over the years in Vietnam, I think all farmers now are following very good farming practices. So there was help from organizations like POSI and Utskape also, because they set up local offices in Vietnam. They put their representatives here. These representatives were locals and they could speak the language. They were told to go to the farms. They were told to educate the farmers and how they could discourage the use of chemical fertilizers versus natural fertilizers, what they should be doing more to increase the productivity and to make sure that the coffee crop would be in for many, many years to come. That was the kind of support that not only the government gave, not only the big companies and big buyers internationally gave, the organizations gave, but locally the people also supported each other. Today in Vietnam, at every origin, in most districts, they have free centers or centers that are distributing coffee saplings, macadamia saplings, mango saplings at a very minimal cost to zero cost. They are providing education by teaching the farmers about the composition of the soil, the topography, so it's helping the farmers to learn more of how to work naturally with the land and how they can sustain this for years to come.
Very encouraging, obviously. The centers which provide saplings and education, they're run by whom?
They are run by the Vietnamese local governments. You can say at a small provincial levels.
Perfect. I think that again speaks to what you have earlier mentioned as the support of the government to ensure that the industry grows sustainably. One thing I would be helpful for us to understand, and Rick, is that we obviously know about 4C certification and so on and so forth. One of the issues that we have heard is that these certifications take money, and they're essentially time consuming and take money. How has Vietnamese farmers got around that?
Ideally, in a situation, Sanjay, when I, as a trader, am buying certified coffee, I have to pay a premium for that coffee versus a non-certified coffee. Let's say if a non-certified coffee is $5,000, a certified coffee could be anything like $5,075 to $5,100. This is the premium that goes to the farmers. Since I'm a trader and I bought from an exporter is obligated to pass this premium to the farmers, and the exporters have to declare this premium to the organizations so that there is a high level of transparency that is maintained. And the organizations know that the farmers are receiving that premium for providing these certified coffees. Now, the farmer is obviously putting in some extra work to follow farming practices and maybe a little bit of loss in production also. So he has to be compensated, which is only fair. The farmers are getting rewarded in terms of extra cash.
So the costs of certification are essentially sort of made up by the extra cash that they make.
Yes.
Give us a sense of, like, say, if I'm operating a large coffee estate, right? Just the high level estimates. How much do I have to pay to get certified, let's say, for a 50 hectare farm?
See, every organization has a different cost structure attached to it to get the certification done. While certain organizations require the players to pay in a flat fee even before any transaction is recorded for certified coffees, some others are only asking for the premium to be paid to those organizations when a transaction happens. It depends upon what term or what year you're talking about. Earlier, and for a different organization, the premiums that were being charged were only about $40 per metric ton. That is to us as traders, as buyers. And then we would be obligated to pay like a royalty fee to these organizations, the certification organizations, which would be about 1.3 cents per pound, or should I say it's about another $40. So let's say all in all, it was costing about $80 for the final buyer to procure this coffee. Now, as a roaster, when they procured certified coffee, they also had to declare the volume of coffee they were buying. And they were also obligated to pay some kind of premiums to the organization. But for a farmer, they did not really have to pay too much.
What I'm hearing you say is that it won't stop somebody from getting certified.
Yeah.
Lovely. So let's talk about climate change a little bit. In your career of 25 years, have you seen bad weather events?
Oh, yes. In 1998 itself, when I joined the coffee industry, people were still talking about the frost in Brazil, which had happened in 1995. The hangover was so large that the markets had gone berserk and the markets had broken all records and they were at an all-time high at that time. And now in 2025, we have also seen the historical highs of Robusta and Arabica markets. Now, all this is all connected to weather anomalies, whether it is a drought, whether it is excessive rainfall, whether it is a frost. These climatic changes definitely affect the supply in the coffee world. The supply in the coffee world, obviously dwindling down and the demand remaining same, leads to a huge spike in the coffee prices. And we have seen that sometimes the coffee markets go into, I'm talking about futures market, they go into an inversion. Inversion is a time when the front month is commanding a premium over the next month. And because of that, the differentials for coffee in origins start coming down, making it attractive for trade houses to deliver the coffee to the exchange so that the destinations where the exchange had the warehouses would have stocks. Basically the whole European contract for coffee was made by Europeans, so it kind of was securing the coffee supplies for the consumers there. But again, coming back to weather anomalies, yes, weather anomalies are becoming frequent, and I've seen plenty of them. Let's say in 2014-15, there was a dry weather in Brazil, which led to coffee spikes. Again, in 24-25, we saw dry weathers, which led to the cherries getting aborted. Cherries were falling off the trees, the flowers were not blooming. And we have seen frost in certain parts of Brazil in 23-24, where the crop was destroyed, the supply was affected, and the prices went ballistic, So this is something which we are seeing very commonly. And every year in June, July, which is the harvesting season for Brazil.
Interrupt you here and ask you one question. Some of this Brazilian ups and downs in coffee production, the drought last year, the rust disease, they're sort of well documented in at least the climate change literature. Would it be interesting as to hear your perspective on whether things are becoming a little bit more frequent or uncertain in Vietnam, for example?
I would say yes, it is becoming frequent because even as an individual, even if I'm not connecting or thinking about the coffee industry as such, one sees the weathers are getting hotter. It's getting hotter. Summers are very, very hot. Rainfalls have become erratic. The intensities have increased. And sometimes there are extreme dry spells, even in what is traditionally called a monsoon season in Vietnam. So we are seeing that. However, it is obviously not possible to forecast that as an individual. But yes, there are many meteorological offices and all. They do project weather these days to the very precise point of, the timing of the rainfall and whether the rainfall is going to be accompanied with thunder showers and all or not. But yes, it is becoming a little bit of a, let's say, surprise. It's becoming something that you are not ready for. So it is, yes, happening.
Wonderful. And we do have to understand this point that you made about futures. Apurva, does the futures market help manage price volatility or does it increase volatility?
Well, you see, futures market is basically a mechanism to hedge one's position, right? There are certain commodities in the world today which are hedgeable and certain which are not hedgeable. Now, when I say hedgeable, that means you do a contrary to what you are doing so that you limit your losses. Yeah. On one side, when I'm buying a bag of coffee from a farmer, that is what we call in the coffee parlance as a physical coffee or physical trade. But there are exchanges in coffee which are located in London and in New York, where I can do just a paper trade, which is just a future, which is like any stock exchange. If you kind of create that anomaly, where I can just do an opposite of what I've done. If I've bought, let's say, 10 tons of coffee here, and I want to limit my risk. So what I can do is I can go and sell one lot of future because one lot of future represents 10 tons. So against a purchase, what I've done is a sale. And later on, when I will sell that coffee someday, right? Because I bought it, when I will sell that coffee, I will go out and buy that one lot of future back because I need to do that. And that is exactly what I meant by saying that I've created a hedge, right? That is what we coffee traders work with. Now, traditionally, and if you go to see plain vanilla, if only coffee traders were to do the hedges and all, the volumes today on the exchanges would be rather small. So there are many other players in the market which are called speculators and non-commercial players. They also get involved, but they are merely in the exercise of buying and selling futures without having much relationship to the physical side of the business, which creates volatilities. See, when today you bring in players from outside who have nothing to do with it, but who have a bucket load of money, They can enter into different trades. Their buying and selling and creating positions lends volatility to the market. And when volatilities are kept uncontrolled, or the participation of unrelated parties is left uncontrolled, you can have very big spikes and very deep troughs in the market. Market can help people control their risk, yes, but one has to be careful as well.
Yeah, you're perfect. I think we've come to the end of the podcast, so I'm going to ask you one quick question. You talked a lot about buyers and the government helping farmers develop better practices. Is there also now an attempt to help address these climate change issues that you say are getting more and more frequent and uncertain as well?
Yes, the government, as I say, they are so involved at the grassroots level that they are providing information almost on a daily basis. So these climatic changes, these kind of spikes in production, or a drought taking place somewhere in the world, or excessive rainfall, that is all publicized, that is all kind of sent out to the lowest level. People know. Today, if I were to take a crop tour within Vietnam, even to the interiors, even a small farmer is aware of the names of the countries like Brazil, or let's say Honduras or Costa Rica, all these coffee producing countries. And they know what is happening there, weather wise, climate wise, or production wise. So, yes, they are aware. They also know of this correlation between Brazil and Vietnam, where the El Nino and the La Nina effect is going to impact Indonesia, it's going to impact Vietnam. So they know this, they are aware. And with farmers, they remember the history very well. For a farmer, if you talk, they say, oh, in this year, this was the weather, and we know that there was excessive rainfall because the weather out there was very dry. The weather in Brazil was not so good. So today, yes, the farmers are very aware, and the government and the governmental bodies at lower levels are responsible for spreading this kind of knowledge.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Apurva. We've come to the end of the podcast. And I'm going to ask you, since this is a podcast about food, and though we have talked about climate change, what is your favorite meal in Vietnam?
My favorite meal in Vietnam, it would be a dish called bun thit nung, which is basically rice noodles with grilled pork, some salad, and topped with a lot of fish sauce, which is a little bit spicy, a little bit sweet, a little bit tangy. So that's my go-to dish if I'm having a Vietnamese meal. Or they have some excellent spring rolls that they make here, which is, with rice paper and herbs. The last one I would say are the pomelo salads. And I think Vietnamese food is something I would rate as the best in the world.
Pomelo salads, what's that?
Yes. Pomelo, the fruit,
Yes.
that is chopped, and it's mixed with herbs, especially like with basil, the Thai basil. It's topped with a little bit of chilies and lemon and some fish sauce. And they also have a nice crispy deep fried tofu slice on it. So it lends a little bit of crunchiness. So it's juicy, little spicy, tangy, sweet, and crispy.
Lovely. And if people want to get in touch with you, how should they?
I'm available through my email ID, which is apurvamanek1407@gmail.com. They can also find me on LinkedIn, and otherwise Facebook as well, but Facebook is really not a business platform for me.
Right. With that, thank you very much, Apurva. It was wonderful speaking to you.
Likewise, Sanjay, it was a pleasure, and wish you all success, and looking forward to the 100th podcast of your channel.
Thank you very much.